I don't know if you can hear that. That's a lot of pens, and that might make Taika Waititi very happy. Welcome to Victims and Villains, the show where we talk about mental health and suicide prevention through pop culture, through education and engaging. My name is Captain Nostalgia, and today we're talking about Lightyear. So buckle in for this fantastic bonus episode we're providing you guys for the month of June. And I am joined by a man that hasn't been on our show since 2018. At least not me. At least me and him haven't podcasted together since 2018, where we talked about Venom and Mr. Jacob Gunther.
So that's the last time I was on here.
Technically,
I think technically that was the last time that you and I podcasted together, because I have been on Victims and Villains since then.
Yes, you were part of our 2019 WrestleMania takeover weekend.
Yes.
Which I'm very, very grateful for. Very grateful for. Maybe if you guys want it to, we'll bring WrestleMania Takedown back next year, or we'll do something with SummerSlam. I don't know. But we're talking about Lightyear, so I guess before we get started, if you guys want to, we put out an episode a couple weeks ago on the very first Toy Story with the Manly podcast host JB Huffman. Go check it out. My name is Captain Nostalgia, by the way. I just realized I did not say my name in the intro. I was too worried about that Taika Waititi joke. Again, I don't know if the pens came through or not, but yeah, man. So let's get into this because I have so many thoughts about this. But before we get into this movie, what is the franchise of Toy Story like mean to you as an individual?
I feel like, I feel like there is a multifaceted answer to that, because I feel like it's a multi-generational answer, because, I remember watching Toy Story 1, when I was younger, and just loving it. It was like, I think, I know there were other movies out at the time that did like the 3D animation thing. Pixar was getting ready to get the ball rolling on that whole, train. But to me, Toy Story always stuck out as like one of the first movies where they kind of did that style of animation. And it was yeah, I know there were other films probably at the time, but it was the first one for me that like stuck out. So, and it's been one of those franchises I feel like that has continuously surprised me, because the first one has obviously it was such a good story. It was such a cool concept, like what do toys do when we're not looking kind of thing. And, I remember after watching it, I would always like sit there with my army men and be like, all right, you guys are going to, you're not going to move because I'm going to sit here, because that's the way my mind worked. And, and then they kept making them. And I remember every time I heard a Toy Story movie was being announced, I was like, there was a part of me that was kind of like, oh man, they're making another one. But then they were all so good. Like each one was very, had different pieces of the puzzle that were just like really good. They were all very emotionally driven. They all were funny, and, some of them were really creepy. And in some ways, Toy Story, I feel like the Toy Story franchise is notorious for having, for kids movies, kind of creepy villains, so to speak. And then the Toy Story franchise has always been, has been special to me in a new light now, because I have two kids of my own. So I've been able to introduce them to the franchise and watch the movies again, and kind of, first of all, seeing them in a whole new light, because I'm kind of seeing them through their eyes, but also appreciating them anew, like as an adult. So I think it's, so they're very special movies to me. And, just because it's multi-generationally, they've been very special, and they just teach us really good lessons about friendship and, coming together. And they were always so funny too. The movies were always just really, really funny.
Yeah, even like going back a couple of weeks ago in prep for the Toy Story episode, me and JB did, I forgot how much I truly loved that movie. Like, Toy Story, like you said, like the franchise as a whole, like even the parts of it that like I might not necessarily like I love that those four movies as a whole.
Hmm.
And you know, and not this ironically enough, this is this you're the second father I've podcasted with. So I do not see these in a different light because I am not currently a father and have no plans to be a father. Um, but I think for me, like the Toy Stories, those were always movies that like that I watched and rewatched growing up, and like even as an adult, like they're the one like type of movie that I feel like you could like throw on and just introduce any generation to, and there's just a timeless quality about them because of like you were saying, like the themes, the I mean, yes, some of the animation for the first one does look dated, but like a lot of like the humor and like just everything about those movies feels so intentional and just timeless.
Very thought out.
And yeah, and so when you shift into Lightyear, this is not a spoiler because it's been confirmed by the directors in the press interviews, but the movie Lightyear itself is a movie that takes place within the fictional universe of Toy Story. It is basically this is the movie that like inspired like Andy's like obsession with the toy line. And let's get into Lightyear because there's so much to deconstruct here. I think this is the first like Toy Story like or any Pixar movie really that I have like so many questions about. Like I've read so many fan theories, and I've never looked forward to a Blu-ray or a director's commentary more than I have for this movie. And well, we'll get into it. So you just got out of it. What are your thoughts, spoiler free, on this one?
Spoiler free thoughts. I really liked it. I'm gonna say I really liked it. I really appreciated that, and you just mentioned this, but because that was one of the things that I was wondering was like, you know, how are they going to make this? You know, is this going to be how connected to Toy Story is this going to be? Basically, like, is this going to be like its own standalone thing, like where they're like no introduction, it's just Lightyear. You know, you already know the character. You know, no ties, no nothing. Here you go. Or are they going to try and connect it in some way? And I really love that they chose to not only connect it but make it like this is the character, like this is the Buzz that is the toy that and I feel like they did a really good job. Like I think Chris Evans is Buzz, and I think he did a really good job with the voice and everything, and just everything about the character was just super awesome. I love that they put like the little words at the beginning where it's just like this is the film that made Andy like love Buzz, and that's why he's so excited with the Toy Story movie.
When we get into like the spoilers like section of the podcast, like I do want to like talk about like the first three sentences that kind of kick off this movie, but I'm very middle of the road for this movie. I'm not necessarily in love with it, but I don't necessarily hate it. I think it's going to be one of those movies that I have to kind of watch a couple times.
Yeah.
Like we were recently talking about the new Motionless in White CD and like kind of how we digest music, talking about like I think this is kind of the same way where it's like I kind of have like neutral feelings on it. Like I don't go one way or another, and I think subsequent viewings are going to be in charge, and I want the Blu-ray to kind of have a more of a kind of have like more of like an understanding for a lot of the creative process and like the creative decisions. And like, I don't necessarily mind that like Chris Evans came in to do this role. Like it's not Tim Allen. Like I understand those creative choices. But for me, I think that it's like I guess we'll bring it up several times throughout the podcast, but we're both big fans of the Buzz Lightyear of Star Command kit series that they did. And
yes.
early 2000s, and it breaks my heart that you can't find it anywhere. But if I had to sum my thoughts on this movie up in 2 sentences, I would say this is the worst movie in the Toy Story franchise, but this is the most cinematic that Pixar has ever been. And I really like it for both of those.
I can agree with those 2 sentences, I think, because at the end of the day, I really, and I have to be careful because we're trying to be spoiler free here, because there's a lot of stuff I want to discuss that I would have to like discuss spoilers. So we'll get to that later. But I think it really did have like a big adventure feel to it. I think they did do a good job of that, where it's like, this is, you know, an adventure, this is action. But it didn't hit I feel like it tried to hit some of the notes that the other Toy Story movies have hit, with some of the themes like friendship, and there was a lot of that in there. And I feel like they were really trying to say like, hey, like, this is why you like Toy Story, right? And I think in some ways you got some of that flavor, but it didn't succeed in the way the other films had. Sure. I will say, in the way that they animated Buzz, I really appreciated that. Like, he was just like, he could have been the toy, just in the way he moved and ran and different things of that nature.
So I have theories about that. So this is your official spoiler warning, so I can get into those theories. I was
about to say, how much more do we have to not talk about spoilers?
The animation is so crisp, and I guess this is like some of my problems with like the overall kind of like the fact that this is a fictionalized movie that's supposed to be taking place in 1995. And my theory is that this is not an animated movie, but this is a live action movie set in the Toy Story universe. How do you feel about that?
I can get behind that, which, I mean, that would explain a lot of things, actually. I mean, I feel like that would explain why his voice sounds different. Yeah. And it would explain, like, to me, that was one of the things where I was like, at the beginning of the movie, I feel like it took a while to kind of hit some of the things that I was expecting in the movie. Like, and some of them were like simple things, like, okay, like at the beginning, like, the sword was cool, the guns were cool. Buzz Lightyear has a laser in his arm. That's what he's supposed to have. And you don't get to see the laser until like it was almost halfway, if not more than halfway through the movie. And it's not even like the official laser. It's like an add-on prop. Yeah, it was like a little, like, it wasn't even the same color as his suit, and then at one point he ejects from his pod, and that's how he gets his wings, like that's when the wings flip out. And then that's like, you didn't even see. It was almost kind of like the whole movie, I was like, this is almost Buzz, but it's not Buzz. And why isn't it Buzz yet? Not in anything, like, not in the character sense, but in just like the way he looked and the equipment he had and things like that. It was almost like a hidden, like, origin, like a visual origin kind of thing, where it's like, well, this is where he gets his laser and this is where he gets his wings. And then by the end of the movie, it's like, well, here's the Buzz Lightyear, like, here he is with the jetpack and the wings and the, and the laser in his arm and all that good stuff.
I genuinely love everything origin story wise about this movie. I think it's the strongest aspects of this movie, and like, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but it does embrace a lot of those like familiar Toy Story themes, like friendship and not judging a book by its cover and learning how to grow with that. But I loved his kind of like arrogance that you have in the beginning of the movie, and then where he comes by the last frame of the movie as he's kind of assembled this ragtag team of misfits and kind of brought them up to a truly great and respectable place. And like you were saying, like with the actual physical character look, I liked the fact that you had to like really earn him being a Star Command, a Space Ranger essentially, because like, I mean, he has the like the shell of the suit in the very beginning, but as the film progresses and like time progresses on, I mean, this movie takes place like it's like 100 over 100 years, correct?
Like within the movie, you mean?
Yeah, because it's
Yeah,
it's a crazy amount of time that passes.
it is. It is because I think he jumped. So I mean, this is the spoiler thing: is that he's trying to perfect his hyperdrive. He's trying to build his hyperdrive, and in building his hyperdrive, he keeps jumping in time. So there's several scenes where he's testing this fuel, and he jumps 4 years each time, and he does that. There's like a montage, and he does it like 4 or 5 times, in which he jumps, and then the last time he jumps, it says that he jumps like 26 years. So I don't know if it's 100 years, but it's definitely. I know at some point in his dialogue he says like over 100 years ago or something like that. But I think with the math that they presented, it was a little less than that. But it's still a gross amount of time, like at least a couple generations.
I sorry.
Are you good?
I know at some point there's a scene where so like just for clarity, like there's a scene in particular where like he comes back after the first like 4 years like gone, and his best friend, whose what's her name again?
Alicia, I think. Hold on.
Alicia, yeah.
Hawthorne.
I'm gonna pull
Alicia
up.
Hawthorne.
Yeah, character.
I had IMDb like up.
But she
Alicia
like
Hawthorne.
Okay, so she basically like gives him a helpmate where it's like, it's a robotic cat, and this cat can literally do anything and everything, and basically before he leaves for the second mission, he like tells this cat like, hey, figure out the equation, like why it won't go wrong. The cat says that it took him, I think he said like 62 or 63 years.
Yeah, 62 years.
So you know that like at minimum there's 66 years that has passed. But I say all of that to say this is like you eventually like get to see him kind of like you were saying, like get the wings, get the buzzer, and then one of the last shots in the movie before the credits is all of the like the space suits we know from the Toy Story movies. Mm-hmm. But yeah, live action, that's my thing. Also, is this supposed to take place in the 90s?
So there was a moment. There was a moment where I had like I wasn't even thinking about the fact that timeline wise it is in the 90s, and there was one moment that brought it like screaming to the forefront of my mind. And there's a scene where he's in the cockpit of his ship, and he's trying to get his autopilot to work, and he puts it in like there's this little console, and it doesn't work the first time he puts it in, so he takes it out and he blows in the side of it. Literally like an N64 cartridge. He's like, autopilot, and he goes like into the side of it, and he pops it back in, works fine. And I just like that happened, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm having like PTSD moments right now. So when that moment happened, that was the moment where I was like, oh right, this is technically supposed to be like in that, like a movie. It's not in that time period, but it is a movie produced by people, in that time period.
Yeah, because like I guess like I'm a cinephile through and through, so like I also like am having like I have no problem with the fact that like this is the origin story of like kind of how this universe got to see Buzz Lightyear. And I'm also, because I mean at the same time, like Toy Story 2 gave us how Woody was introduced to that universe as well. Like he was Woody's Roundup. And so like this feels like the flip side of that. And I guess like there's not a whole lot about this movie that feels like it was supposed to be produced in the 90s. That's why like I feel like it's kind of like a forced time period piece, if that. But I mean, like Star Wars, I think, is another great example because there are several moments in the Toy Story franchise where like they've parodied Star Wars, and like Star Wars, even though it was made, even though there's a timeless quality about it, like you can still tell it was made in the 70s.
Yes. Yeah, no, for sure. And that's the thing, is that like they're telling you that this is a movie that was made in that time period, but they didn't do a lot to drive that home. So, there was a lot of things in it that were very, obviously modern. So they didn't. It's almost like they didn't want to go for that feeling like super hardcore. It's just kind of like they did it more to tie it to the rest of the universe. Like the first movie came out in the 90s, therefore this movie was made in that same time period.
Like, yeah. So like Mike and I were talking about this Monday night before we got done recording our newest episode of That's High Praise. I don't necessarily have an issue with the fact that this is a fictionalized movie within the larger grand scheme universe of Toy Story. I love the fact that they're like thinking about like bringing new spins to like these classic characters.
Right.
My problem is that like it's like you're saying, like there are like moments that feel like the 90s, but it still overall feels very modern.
Yeah, by and large, it's a modern movie. It's not it's not a 90s film.
I guess I would like just want you to commit. It's like if you took like an episode of like Stranger Things and they just happen to have like oh yeah, like check out these flip phones that we have and like
right.
these iPhones and like let's go take down the Upside Down. Like you wouldn't see something like that happen.
Right.
Like they commit to the 80s, like to the soundtrack, the lore, even the villains of that entire thing feel like the 80s.
Right. Right. And there were moments, it's kind of like what I was saying, like there was that one moment where he blows on the autopilot. I was like, "Oh my gosh." And then but beyond that, there was not a lot of other things that really drove that point home. They very much stayed within the modern, which gave us the big adventure feel. It's like even though that was the expectation that was maybe kind of set, there are a lot of reasons why they didn't do that at the same time, I'm sure.
Yeah, and like I said, like I don't necessarily have problems with the way this movie presents itself. It's just I would have wanted one or the other because it feels like you have like one thing is you feel like you're trying to like force the existence of this movie by a reason to write it off to where it's you don't necessarily have Tim Allen in the role.
Right. Like if they were
committing to that.
Like if they were gonna say this is connected to Toy Story, then make it more like Toy Story-esque. Like obviously it's a Buzz film, but like make it more connected to that universe, or don't connect it to the universe at all and make it its own thing. Like pick one or the other.
Yeah, like kind of, and I know this is a family movie, and this is kind of like a completely black sheep example, but when you look at like what DC was doing with like the DCEU, in the midst of that, you had Todd Phillips' Joker come out. This is like a really serious, really grounded take on a character that's never been in the comics and has no larger connection to the story that they're telling. Like right. I feel like I would have been a little bit more apt to love this movie had they kind of gone with that. And like I said, like a lot of my complaints are just from one viewing. Like I want to have a better understanding of this movie upon subsequent viewings, but like just watching it once, like this is kind of where I feel or land.
Yeah, no, and I I mean, I feel the same way. Like I definitely want to watch it again. It's very fresh in my mind right now. I literally just came from the theater and watched it like a few hours ago. It's very fresh in my mind, but even with it being fresh in my mind, there's a lot of things that I'm just like, I definitely want to go back and watch it again and kind of process it's kind of that feeling of like after you see a movie, you're just like, okay, what did I just see? And there are things that it's like, okay, I definitely know I liked that, and then it's like, then there are some things where it's like I need to think about that, and then there are things that are just like, okay, I straight up just did not appreciate that at all being in the movie, you know.
Yeah, we'll get to the things we probably I think we're on the same page for things we didn't appreciate about this movie. But I am kind of curious of like how you feel. You teased a little bit of it, but how do you feel as Chris Evans as Lightyear?
I think he did a good job. Like I think he did a great voice. I think he did enough to kind of give an homage to Tim Allen without replacing him. You know, like he definitely, like you could tell that was definitely Buzz Lightyear, but you could tell it wasn't like Tim Allen's Buzz Lightyear. And as much as I would have loved to see Tim Allen, because when they announced, hey, we're going to do a Lightyear movie, there was a big part of me that was like, oh my gosh, you got to get Tim Allen in there, you know, to do the voice. But at the same time, I feel like that would have, and this is with the, you know, the world we have now. Like we have Chris Evans, he's, you know, Lightyear in the movie, you know, but it's kind of one of those things where I feel like if they had gotten, it gives it a different feel. You know, it is Lightyear, but it's not the toy Buzz Lightyear. This is like the person Buzz Lightyear. And I feel like he does enough to tell you like, hey, this is the same person, but he's different at the same time, you know? So I think I enjoyed his, you know, performance. And I liked too that it was sometimes in films, I think if you have a character that's based on something else or a character that's, you know, in another universe, sometimes the way that they will drop like the Easter eggs in conversation, you know, and sometimes that feels very forced, where they're like, the movie is like telling you, hey, this is that person. Don't you know? He says that, you know, that thing you like to hear him say, you know, and his delivery, and it might've been his delivery, it might've been just the way that it's written. None of the things that he said that were like Easter eggs to who he was sounded that way, you know? And what I mean by that is like, you know, there was a scene where he's like sitting there or he's trying to steal the shuttle and they're closing the gate or whatever. And he goes, blast. And he moves on, and it's just like, oh, that's, you know, and it's like it's enough of a throwback to the toy. It's enough of a throwback to the Toy Story movies to tell you this is the same guy without feeling like it's a forced thing that this is him, you know.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in this show, understand that you listening to this right now have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Yeah, there's a couple like throwback moments to the original film. There's a line, obviously the most famous is the him and Alicia's To Infinity and Beyond.
Yeah.
Thing that I really liked their take on that, because it fit the tone of the film a lot better. But I don't know if you caught this or if you like chuckled at this, but there's a moment where he is talking with someone. I don't remember exactly who he's talking to, but his response to them is, "You're mocking me, aren't you?"
Yes.
I was the only person in the theater that like just busted out laughing. Like I was like, yes, yes, brought back one of the best lines in all of the Toy Story franchise.
It's such a good line. And that's what I mean though, is that like there were so many good like even the narrating thing, like he's doing his mission log and stuff like that. Within the first few minutes of the film, he hits a lot of those points. He's doing his mission log, he's like, the terrain is unstable, there's no sign of intelligent life, and he's basically doing that. But the way that it's delivered, it wasn't like, oh man, they're really trying to push that this is Buzz Lightyear. It's just like, It was seamlessly flowed into the dialogue to the point where, like in the middle of the movie, like that line you just described, or him saying blast or something, like those are just things flowing within his conversation, but they're like, oh, we know that, and we know he says that, because he said it, 2 or 3 times in the Toy Story movies.
Yeah, so like where I stand with Chris Evans is to your point about, well, first to your point about Tim Allen. I don't think Tim Allen fits the tone of this movie.
Yeah,
because Allen has always played that character very either dry, sarcastic, but there's always a level of humor that's in this. And this movie it's a space epic. I mean, there's no way to describe it. Like, this is the first film that, like I said in the beginning, like this movie feels very cinematic. I recommend seeing this on the biggest screen possible because
it was a beautiful movie.
Gorgeous. It feels like a space journey. And that's what I want if I'm going to sit down and watch a movie about Space Command and Buzz Lightyear. My thing is that I don't know if anyone else has this pet peeve, but I have this pet peeve. If I've seen an actor perform in a movie and they're written a certain way or they portray a character a certain way, and then they come along and do another role and that character is exactly the same as character A, I can't see it. Chris Evans as Buzz Lightyear is Captain America in space. I mean, there's no other way for me to like get around it. And like, I don't necessarily hate him as it. I'm just now questioning reality. I'm like, is Chris Evans like actually acting anymore? Or when he plays nice guys, is he just kind of playing himself?
I mean, that is a very fair point. There were several moments where just in some of the dialogue and stuff, he would be saying things, and I was just like, that's Cap. Like I think he did enough of, there were those moments. I'm not gonna lie and say, oh no, I totally couldn't tell it was Chris Evans. Like there were totally moments where, he would say something, and I was just like, well, that's Captain America talking, and but then I feel like he did enough of but then there were moments where, yes, it sounded like Cap, but you could, he did a good homage to, what he was supposed to do, I think. But I understand what you're saying though. It's just like once you've seen an actor be somebody, it's hard to unsee them or unhear them as that character, especially like Chris Evans. If you've played that character spanning several years, say like 10 years, like he was Cap for 10 years. Well, a little less than 10 years because I think Captain America came out a little bit later, but he played that character for a little under a decade. So
yeah,
that's a long time to be playing one, person.
And especially something like in something like the MCU, whereas like, millions and billions of people watch that. I mean, the MCU has kind of like changed the face of cinema as we know it in modern culture.
Oh yeah.
I almost like expect it like the fight at the end between like Buzz and Zurg. I almost have expected him to just kind of like look at Zurg as he was kind of being defeated and just being like, I can do this all day.
Yeah. Like if he had said that, it would have been, it would have fit, it would have fit, and it would have, well, maybe it wouldn't have fit, but it would have been a little wink, you know.
I just kind of hope out there that like somehow like a Disney exec has heard this and they're going back to like reanimate like a deleted short scene from that and they're just adding that line in there, or someone has had the same notion that I did and it's already in there. It'll be on the Blu-ray.
There you go. It'll be a blooper. It'll be a blooper for Lightyear.
Yeah, well, with that, this movie makes some very interesting choices when it comes to emperor-zurg. And this might be my biggest complaint of the movie. This might be what really lowballs this movie for me. Because Zurg is not an emperor. He is nothing more than a time-traveling version of Buzz Lightyear. Wow.
I'm with you. This was actually my biggest letdown and my biggest complaint with this movie is Zurg, how they handled Zurg, because previously stated, first of all, not even with this. So just in Toy Story lore, like let's forget for a second the animated TV show. Let's forget the Lightyear movie. Let's just say the Toy Story lore is that Zurg is from everything that I've seen and read, he's either a robot or a cyborg, and that's actually not 100% known which one he is, first of all. But he is an emperor, so he's a leader, but he's also the sworn evil enemy of the Galactic Alliance. He's the sworn enemy of Buzz Lightyear. He is like, there's so much in the Toy Story movies that actually builds up Zurg as like this big, evil entity that Buzz is fighting. And the most we see of that is in Toy Story 2, where we actually see him as a toy, trying to destroy Buzz and all that good stuff, which is, in my opinion, some of the funniest, coolest stuff in any of the Toy Story movies is Buzz Lightyear versus Zurg in the elevator. Is like, you can't get any better than that. It's so good. And then you get like the animated TV show where, again, it's like the whole, like half of that TV show was Buzz versus Zurg. That was the battle, like that was the battle. And so now you bring in the Lightyear film, and they kind of just they act like the film acts like they're going to build up to that. Like you see Zurg you don't even see Zurg fully until like, the movie's like fairly on its way, first of all. So you don't even see him. So there's no conflict really between, Zurg and Buzz initially. Like Buzz doesn't even know that Zurg exists, really. He just knows that there's these robots after him, And then when that reveal happened, because that is the reveal, is that Zurg is not Zurg, but he's Buzz from like an alternate reality that time traveled to the point where he, and I guess in his reality, I might have interpreted this wrong in the film, but from the way I saw it is like he's from a different reality where he came back. They were not appreciative of him succeeding and fixing the hyperdrive. So he went and time traveled even more to try and find the crystal. So he's basically still trying to complete the mission that Buzz is still trying to complete in the present. And that's who Zurg is.
Which the whole like time travel thing like opens up like even more conspiracy theories about this, because like at that point you're like, you've dug yourself into a hole where it's like, okay, like this movie is a 95 live action blockbuster taking place within the fictional universe of the Toy Story franchise. And then we fast forward to,
and then you have like two or three timelines. Yeah, and then you have two or three timelines that are just within that 90s film within the Toy Story universe. So this film has like multiple layers to it already. So because I could even be wrong in my interpretation of that scene. The way I watched it was he's from an alternate timeline or something.
That's the way that I interpret it. Like, yeah. And like he even kind of like explains himself, and like
I was talking with one of the former co-hosts of Victims and Villains recently about this, and the scene where you were just referring to from Toy Story 2, where they're in the elevator and he does that Star Wars homage. He's like, "I am your father," and when he steps out of the mecha suit for the first time, his first initial reaction is "Dad."
Dad.
And I just want to call out that Cody said that's a callback to that "I am your father" scene, which I thought was great. I didn't connect that to, so I'm so glad for him to kind of like bring that up.
Oh, I was like, I even whispered to my friend who I went to the theater with, I was like, it's got to be his dad, or and then he's like, no, and then I was like, oh, okay, it's not his dad, but but even when the suit opened up, I was like, I had a bad feeling. Like up until that point, I was like, come on, yeah, we're getting Buzz versus Zurg, and then when the suit opened up, I was like, this is not going to be good. Because no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I even hate the way that this movie like handles Zurg, because Zurg comes so late in, like, even like the sheer mention of Zurg comes so late in this movie that it feels like they had two competing visions coming together for this, where it was like, we have to have a Lightyear movie, but also at the same time we have to have a Zurg in this movie somewhere.
I completely agree. And it's almost like the battle was, and this is what made the movie enjoyable, but with some disappointments, is that it felt like the majority of the movie was like you were saying, like a space odyssey, like adventure type thing. And it's Buzz and he's, with his group of people, and they are adventuring together and they're facing danger on this planet. And it's almost like a space exploration movie or an escape movie almost, because they're trying to like launch off the planet, right? And they're overcoming these obstacles together, and there's like, it's almost like a buddy space adventure, like they're becoming closer and learning about each other as they face these obstacles, right? That's like a space adventure movie is what half of this was. And then there was this other half where it was like, this is going to like it's like a space battle movie, where it was like, this is Buzz versus Zurg, and there's going to be a battle and there's going to be a fight, and it's good versus evil. And it was almost like they wanted to have both of those movies, and they couldn't. And I feel like the space adventure part won. Like, we spent more time with Buzz and his crew adventuring, which was enjoyable. But to me, if you're going to make that movie, don't put Zurg in it at all. Or if you're going to put Zurg in it, at least make Zurg what he was supposed to be, because coming into the film, I was really hoping for, there was a big part of me that was thinking about the old TV show and hoping that we would have some of those like good versus evil, like Buzz versus Zurg moments, where it's like, he is the evil emperor and he's trying to conquer this world, and Buzz is going to stop him, and they're fighting each other,
Yeah, I was right there with you, man. Like, I was, again, I've had so many conversations this past week about this movie, and specifically like all the things that like revolve around the Zurg character. Like, Zurg just feels like an afterthought, and I had this same exact complaint when it came to Salvatore from season 3 of The Flash, where like it was a alternate Barry Allen that was nothing more than emo. And I was like, dude, if you read the comics, Chuck Dixon created a cult leader around the Speed Force. Like, there is like nothing more sinister than that. Like, you basically took a guy, Charles Manson, stuck him in the Speed Force and created a family. And you decided to go, oh no, we're just going to go with the Barry Allen that got really depressed and didn't go to therapy. And it's like, dude, no. And that's kind of what this felt like, is that like Buzz couldn't handle the weight of his own failure and ended up kind of becoming Zurg.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned that, because I had the same exact thought walking out of the theater, where I was just like, this is Salvatore. This is what they did in the Flash show. Like, I literally had the same thought, where it was just like, the suit, it literally almost visually the same way. Like the suit
Oh, yeah.
opens up and it's like, oh, it's just me from the future. Like, and I failed, or I still think I'm failing, you know?
Yeah, the only difference is Zerg opens from the front and Salvatore opened from the back.
From the back.
But I mean, with that, all joking aside, like all issues aside, I mean, it is a very, coming back to the mental health portion of Zerg is like, here you have a guy that quite literally, like, instead of seeking help and instead of reaching out and starting a conversation, whether that's with a counselor, peer, just a counselor, whatever the circumstance was, like, he constantly just kind of kept chasing him. And that's ultimately the downfall of Buzz throughout the course of this movie, is he needs to learn to trust others and the importance of community, and also at the same time being able to face your inner demons.
Absolutely. I mean, I was able to write down a couple little things as far as like some of the lessons and stuff that I felt like the movie was trying to push, or not push, but show us. And the number one was, don't do life alone. Don't, especially when it comes to your like mental health, and I know mental health is like obviously a big deal, but I mean also just in general with life, to not do it alone. Never feel like you can handle everything by yourself. We are not designed to handle everything by ourselves. And this movie really like shows us that. Like Buzz is like, let me do it myself. Let me do it all by myself. And every time he does it by himself, things get worse and worse and worse. And it's only when he lets. And here's the thing too. I thought about this. It's not that sometimes I feel like people have a hard time where it's like, well, I'm just waiting for the right people to let into my life. I want certain people to be in my life to help me with this thing. And sometimes you can't be picky. Like, I'm not saying we should open up to anybody, and you shouldn't open up to Joe Blow on the street. But at the same time, we shouldn't be picky with gathering people around us and being open and vulnerable with people around us as well. And I think this movie really shows that, because Buzz wanted to work with somebody. He wanted to work with Alicia Hawthorne. That's who he wanted to work with. Like, his driving force was, let me go, let me be a space ranger with Alicia. That was his driving force. And he had to, at some point in the film, he had to be humble and realize, you know what, I'm not going to be able to do that again. I need to, I need help now. And, there's that moment in Zerg's ship where he's like, I don't need Alicia, I need you. He's talking to her granddaughter, like, I need you to help me, so I think that's a very, very, that was a very prominent theme throughout the movie, is that, we shouldn't try to do things on our own. And I think it is very true for mental health, because there's so much about mental health that just keeps us, like, one of the biggest fears I think that we all have is like, what will other people think? And let me just keep it a secret and let me just handle it by myself. And as soon as you entertain those thought processes, I feel like you're fighting a losing battle, because we're not designed to do that. And especially when it comes to like anxiety, depression, and those kind of things, those things want you to stay silent and just suffer. And one of the biggest ways we can combat those is to be open and honest about them.
Yeah, and like, I mean, we're kind of like shifting back into like a 2019 norm now as a society, where like you're actually like, we're getting back in together with, through concerts, and we just went to go see a couple bands a couple weeks ago together. I think at the same time, like, here you have two characters that are two different versions of the same character, where in like the older Buzz, I think having the robots around, that can't pronounce Buzz, so they call him Zurg. So lame. I think in all seriousness, you can kind of see, like, he's, like you were saying, like, he's just kind of like shoved it down. And hasn't really allowed that the the stress of that mental health and like almost kind of like the failure and the unhealthiness allow him to kind of really be confronted. Whereas Buzz, on the other hand, he has people, and he's spent 60 years trying to essentially travel and fix this one mistake that he's constantly created. And even when he is presented with Izzy, Mo, and Darby, and even Socks to a lesser degree, like he kind of is like, yes, they're working together, but he's just kind of like taking them along where he's still doing the majority of the things. And that's also not a healthy spot to be either. Like, just because you surround yourself with people doesn't mean you necessarily surround yourself with community and friends. Like, you have to dare to be vulnerable. You have to dare to really trust that as you put yourself out there in a transparent light, that you're going to be reciprocated with, love and those harsh truths, and you're going to grow with people and not just stay stagnant in the depression and the anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Finding the right people is so important. And you just touched on, something else that I really saw, and that was like learning from your mistakes was a really big prominent theme, and just overcoming failure, and when I say, and I think this film showed a very interesting aspect of that, in that I think sometimes, we have a failure happen, and maybe it's not a failure, but I even thought about, having something that we are supposed to be grieving over, something that we're supposed to be sad for. And a lot of times it's like some of those things that happen that are bad or uncomfortable. A lot of times our reaction is like, well, I'm just going to move on. I'm going to complete the mission, as Buzz says. He says that so many times in the movie, where it's like, this happened, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to keep going because I'm going to complete the mission. And it gets to the point where he's like, his mission is hurting not only himself, but it's the people around him too, that are about, like, literally people are being obliterated around him in his quest to complete his mission, and sometimes we have to be able to stop and like take the time to like learn through our mistakes and learn through the things that are uncomfortable, and maybe even grieve over things, like when things don't go our way, or when we have a tragedy in our lives, or when we have a trauma in our life. Community is a big part of that, but also I think just slowing down sometimes and allowing those things, not shutting down yourself emotionally, but let yourself experience those emotions and grow through those emotions, rather than letting those, just shutting them down, and just moving on. Like, I just got to keep going,
Yeah. There's a line from a Memphis Mayfire song where it says something along the lines of, my darkest times are the times where I grow. And, I think nobody likes to embrace failure. Nobody likes to embrace, the sadder side of life. But I think it's in those moments where you can, as you were saying, grieve, and you can grow from those moments, and really kind of pick out what works and what doesn't, and learn to move on and grow, and keep trying again. And there's a point in the movie too where it's Buzz and Zurg first kind of intermeet, and they're talking about how Zurg is kind of this Elseworld version of Buzz, and he's talking about all his failures. And Buzz kind of has this moment of clarity where he sees, oh, hey, like, this is what I could grow to be if I keep on this path. And it's this moment of where he's like, he understands the weight of everything that he's put Mo, Izzy, and Darby through, and has learned to kind of grow above that. And I think that's really crucially important when you're considering the fact of, the mental health, and not only the mental health of this film, but also when you're faced with those less than ideal situations. Like, you need to understand that, like, it's okay to be broken or sad for a couple of days if things don't go your way, because you gotta dust yourself off and try again, as Aaliyah says, and I think that's right. Anyways, because again, that's how you're gonna end up growing.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think it's such an important lesson of just like, even though we as humans, we are so geared to like not experience things that make us uncomfortable, but it's sometimes we put so much effort into not experiencing things that are uncomfortable that we run into other traps that are set for us. And I think it's like, even if there's an uncomfortable emotion or an uncomfortable thing happening on like, we can't ignore that. Ignoring it just turns it into a problem. The other thing that I kind of saw in the film was there was a definite theme with Izzy and Alicia in their story of like generational pressure. Just pressure, or I will say maybe pressure is not the right word, but generational expectations. Where Izzy had read and experienced so much of who her grandmother was, that she was trying so hard to be her and emulate like who her grandmother was. And there's a moment in the film where she's like, I'm not her, and Buzz is like, well, I don't need her, I need you. And you can just see there's almost a moment in the film where she just has like that pressure or that expectation just lifted off of her. And I really liked that. And I feel like that is a real thing too, of just like, we should learn to be who we are, and parts of who we are wrapped up in who our parents were and who our grandparents were. And like, genetics are a thing. We can't escape that, right? But, at the same time, we don't need to succumb to like pressure from previous generations to be something that we're not.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree, man. Like, I don't know if you went through this, but like I went through that when I first got married, where like I've kind of joked around with my family and kind of like claim the term that like I'm the black sheep, because I dress in all black, and like I'm the only one in my family that listens to metal. I'm the only one that listens to horror, watches horror movies and stuff like that. But like the first year of Eric and I's marriage, every time that we were either in a church setting or I was around my portion of family, the question of, when are you having children always came up, because, it's a societal like expectation for former generations. You get married, you have a 9-to-5, you create a family, you procreate, you retire, and so on and so forth. And that's just not the life that like we want to have. That's not the goal that we want to desire, and we've, talked about it. We've prayed about it a lot. And like, we just kind of realized that like kids aren't necessarily for us. And a lot of that expectation was really heavy. It was really heavy to carry for the first year. And like, it come to the point where like I would I would dread being around certain people because I just hated having that same conversation over and over again. I really relate it to a lot of like what Izzy kind of was going through, where like here you have like her grandmother like was one of like the pioneers of like the leaders in this galaxy or like planet that they were marooned on, and like she really made a way for herself, and you know, she had all these acolytes and really carved out a reputation for herself. That's a hard legacy to follow. And I'm really glad that, you know, we have a character like Izzy that is terrified of space.
Yeah.
And like, you know, is trying to also live up to that legacy. And I think that just created some really interesting dynamics for her character and Buzz, and kind of like their growing pains, but like also her as a character, like allowed her to become her own person and stand apart from the generational expectations.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it was so well presented in the movie, and like even that moment where they're like going up for the first time, and she's like, "Oh, I'm afraid of space," and Buzz is like, "What do you mean you're afraid of space?" And there's like that whole moment where it's just like, "Hey, you know, that's a legitimate fear, and it's nothing like her previous generations," and she overcomes that fear, you know, throughout the course of the movie. But it was just like, I feel like the way that was presented was just so well done, and I feel like I was just thinking about it, like when that moment on the ship happened where he's like, you know, I don't need Alicia, I need you, and you just see that look on her face. I was just like, wow, that's a real thing, because I've experienced that too, of like, you know, for me it was the military. I come from a very, you know, military centric family. I have, you know, my grandfather was served in the Navy. He was actually on a submarine for most of his younger life. And then, you know, that's just bled into into future generations. You know, I have an uncle who was in the Navy. Then I have like 3 cousins who are in the Marine Corps. My brother was in the Marine Corps for a little while. My sister's dating someone who's in the Marine Corps. So, you know, there's like a lot of military centric things in my family. So when I was growing up, when I was getting ready to like graduate high school and stuff, everybody was asking like, so when are you going to sign up? What branch are you going to choose? Like that was just the expectation that like you're going to join the military, you know. And I thought about it, you know, I really did, you know, I thought about it like you were saying, thought about it, prayed about it. And I was just like, I am not that kind of person. You know, I am not the kind of person that can do the military. I just know I'm not, you know. And so it was one of those things where I had to have a lot of hard conversations with family members and just be like, yeah, that's not for me. You know, I'm not going to do that. You know, I'm going to do something else, you know, with my life. You know, and it took a while for that pressure to leave, but you know, it eventually, I think the trick with it is, well, not the trick, but I think the thing with it is that it's a combination of either people understanding that they can't put those expectations on you, so they stop. But I think the real shift comes when you become comfortable in who you are and in your own skin. That's when that shift happens.
Yeah, it's a twofold process, because in one form you have to be comfortable and confident enough in your own self and in your own identity as an individual, but also on the flip side you also have to you know, kind of essentially teach the older generations or the previous generations way of thinking that this isn't necessarily the way that, you know, modern adults think. You know, I don't want to necessarily say that there's generational gaps, essentially, where like, you know, now this generation is kind of, our generation is, you know, the economy is bad. You know, we are the first generation that has like, you know, millions and billions of dollars of student debts. It's harder for us to like get find housing sometimes, get loans. I mean, like the struggle is real.
Mhm.
And the things that like our parents again went through, like it, I don't want to say they had it easier, but in a way they kind of did. And so you have to also like navigate like the differences and like how the generations were like born and raised.
Yeah. No, that's 100% true. There's a lot of things that, I mean, that could be a whole conversation. I won't say too much because I feel like we're tiptoeing on the cusps of like an entire like other conversation that could happen.
Yeah.
But it's a very real thing that, there is definitely a generational gap. There are definitely things that the previous generation dealt with that our generation has not. And that's multifaceted. And so, but I think too, within this conversation, I think one, it is important to not succumb to generational pressure. But I will say this, and I have also experienced this, but it is also not okay to discount or dishonor the previous generation at the same time, because even though it's like a different world, they have been through the world, they have experience. Like, if I could leave an encouragement with anybody, who's listening, is, be yourself and be okay in your own skin, but also seek out the older generation who's willing to talk to you and to share their life experience and do life with you. Because those people will be like invaluable to your walk.
Absolutely. I don't want to like discount like previous generations, because I mean, like they have war, they have their own griefs, they have their own mental health problems. But I just, again, I think because some of the previous generations have kind of grown up and been accustomed to certain ways that like they just expect, again, going back to generational expectations. But as you said, that is another podcast in and of itself. Let's come back to Zerg. And how do you feel about the fact that they had let me phrase this before I ask this question. Did you stay for all 3 post-credit scenes?
I did.
All right. How do you feel about the fact that we are potentially getting a sequel to this?
It's interesting because if I hadn't seen that last little scene, I would have said that was a really great movie that just kind of wrapped everything up with a nice little bow and left it. But we don't live in the world of one-shot stories. We live in the world of sequels and series. So so I would be here for it. It didn't make me feel, I'm kind of indifferent. I'm kind of indifferent to the fact that they're potentially teasing like a sequel to it. I would want, like, if they're going to keep Zurg in it, I would want the next one to have more of the, like, if the movie that we just saw is like the kind of the origin of the conflict of Buzz and Zurg, I would want it to be more centered around that.
Yeah, like actually like make him like a emperor and bring in a lot of that lore for that character.
Yes, that's what I would want. I would like, and maybe even give us some of that. Like maybe he becomes emperor-zurg in the second one, or something like that. Like he's just Zurg right now, right? So maybe in the second film he's like, his mission, like Buzz stopped him, right? So now his mission is to kill Buzz, and we see like the more of the origin of who Zurg is, and we get like that conflict movie.
If that is the case, that we end up getting that character, I am okay with the sequel. I initially was kind of like, you wasted Zurg in this movie, why bring him back for a second one? You literally could either create a brand new villain or pull from the animated series. Like, why does it have to be this iconic bad guy?
Yeah. Like if that's my thing. If they're going to do another one, and if the end little cutscene is anything to go by, it's going to have Zurg in it. Like, if you're going to do that again, then you need to give Zurg a hallway redemption scene and give him back his power. You know, they need to do what Star Wars did, because Star Wars started giving every single character a hallway redemption scene. You know, Luke Skywalker went down a hallway and just killed a bunch of dudes, and then Darth Vader went down a hallway in Rogue One and killed a bunch of dudes. So we need to give Zurg a hallway and just have him, you know, give him a little redemption. Because here's my thing: I have always been a believer in this, and that I love the good guys, I love the heroes. But my biggest thing is that a hero is not worth rooting for if you don't have a good villain to contrast him. You know, you have to have a good villain to contrast your, or I think contrast is the right word, but to, you know, counter that good. And we saw, and in this movie, like, again, half of it was like a space adventure, but when it came to the conflict, you didn't really get much of a conflict, because you didn't build up the evil very well. And even the evil wasn't really evil. It was mainly misunderstood because it was Buzz, time travel.
Yeah.
So if you're going to really root for a hero, if you want us to go into the theater and you want us to root for Buzz and cheer for Buzz, and you want that to happen, then we need to have evil Emperor-zurg in full form.
And I think on the flip side of that, like, you didn't have Buzz as the hero we know him for. Like, it felt like an origin story. So if this is like the beginning of a Lightyear trilogy or even a duology, I think you lay the groundwork for Buzz to become a hero. Like, Buzz as the leader of Star Command, like, by the end of the film, feels like the Buzz Lightyear that we know from the previous 4 films. And Zurg kind of hadn't, like you said, like, it's misunderstood, like antagonist in it, a misunderstood antagonist. And if you're gonna, like, do it, like, make sure that you are doing it in a way that is going to be, like, reflective of the lore, as we've been saying.
Yeah, and I'm totally with you. Like, just as I'm kind of harping on Zurg right now and saying, like, if you're going to give us another movie, like, make Zurg evil, like, you can literally do the same thing with Buzz. Because by the end, like, to your point, like, by the end of this movie, he is the Space Ranger. He's got his suit. He's got his posse. And he's got his ship. Like, when I saw the ship, that was one of those little, like, nuggets where I kind of geeked out over their ship that they were getting into. Because I don't know if you noticed this, but it literally was the same color scheme and almost the same shape as his box in Toy Story.
Oh, I missed that one.
It was literally like they were about to get in his box. That was like, when I saw the ship, I geeked out a little bit because I was like, it's his box. Like, so, you know, he's got his ship, he's got his crew, and he's about to blast off and protect the galaxy. You know, that's like his mission. And they kind of drove this point home in the movie. His mission in the course of the movie changed from exploration to protection. You know, it shifted. So if we are going to get a Buzz Lightyear or a Lightyear 2 movie, make Zurg evil, make Buzz good, you know, like, give us that conflict that would be so cool to see.
And Disney, if you just happen to see this or hear this, please call your sequel Lightyear to Infinity and Beyond.
Yeah, buddy. Perfect. Nailed it.
Or I don't know, maybe just call it To Infinity, and then you can call it Part 3 and Beyond.
See? Perfect.
Just start writing me checks, Disney. All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this up. On our Rorschach rating scale, 0 to 5, where would this one land for you?
I've thought about this because I knew you were going to ask me. Like, when I left the theater, I was like, okay, 1 through 10, what's going to be my number? And then I was like, nope, I can't do 1 through 10 because Josh does his Rorschach rating, and that's 1 through 5. So I have to think of a different number. So I actually have thought about this, and I want to give it a 4, but I think it's actually a 3.5.
All right, that's fair. I'm gonna go a little bit lower at a 3. I
feel like this movie has a lot of potential, and I feel like it'll grow on me with subsequent watches.
Yeah.
It's just it hit me really lukewarm the first viewing.
Yeah, like it definitely, I enjoyed it. Like it wasn't like I had a bad time in the theater, but at the same time, for a Lightyear film, it did not hit everything that I was hoping that it would hit. So hence 3.5.
Well, if you guys have seen Lightyear, let us know what you guys think about it. Make sure you guys go back and check out our Toy Story episode with JB Huffman of the Manly Podcast. And my dude, where can people find you online, or do you have anything to plug?
So if you want to find me online, I'm semi-active on social media right now. I'm not super on there, but I do have an Instagram and a Twitter, which are both Jake's take on it, Instagram and Twitter. And if you are a fellow beardsman out there and you need beard grooming products, I actually have my own line, my own beard grooming product company called Weathered Wings Company, which you can find us. We have an Instagram right now, which is Weathered Wings Company. So you can go give us a follow. We try to put out beard grooming advice and talk about just beard care in general and try to get our products out there at the same time. So if you're a fellow beardsman like Captain Nostalgia and myself, and you need some beard products, let me know.
Yeah, I haven't actually tried it, so I can't confirm nor deny the quality of it. You guys can find me. I'm on Letterboxd. I'm at Captain Nostalgia, and I'm also on TikTok as well. It's at Gent Gent Ghostface, and you guys can follow us everywhere. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and wherever you guys get your podcast from. If you guys would like to support us, we have a GoFundMe right now where you guys can do a one-time donation or support us monthly and get exclusive cool content, all of which you guys can find in the show notes below. And also, you guys make sure that you guys check out victimsandvillains.net/hope. Again, it'll be in the show notes below, but that is our mental health resource library. So until next time, to infinity
and beyond.
I was hoping you would get that. Have a good night, guys.